Consider a world where the cost of your daily bread doubles overnight and the fuel to cook it becomes a luxury. This is not a scene from a dystopian novel. It is the stark reality unfolding before our very eyes. In a world grappling with soaring prices and economic uncertainty, the forces behind global inflation are as complex as they are consequential. Today, we embark on a journey into the heart of the crisis, exploring how supply shocks, demand pull pressures, and geopolitical risks interweave to reshape economies and the very lives of millions. In the opening moments of our story, sweeping satellite images reveal the intricate networks of global commodity routes. Bold economic charts flash across the screen, charting the unprecedented surge in food, energy, and housing costs. The dramatic visuals remind us that these numbers are not mere statistics. They represent the lived experiences of families, workers, and entire communities worldwide. Prices on billboards, bustling food markets alive with uncertainty, and cramped apartments all serve as powerful testimonies to a profound and ongoing economic crisis. The world, as we have known it, is changing. Global inflation is no longer a distant economic concept tucked away in textbooks. It is a daily struggle, a relentless pressure that impacts everything from the price at the grocery store to the cost of heating a home. This phenomenon is fueled by a confluence of factors that we will now explore in detail, a labyrinth of supply shocks, demand pull forces, and the ever-present shadows of geopolitical turbulence. As our narrative unfolds, we begin with an examination of the shockwaves that have rocked global supply chains. The story of global inflation is one of unexpected disruptions and cascading effects. The COVID-19 pandemic, for instance, disrupted manufacturing and shipping on a scale not seen in decades. In its wake, supply chains buckled under the weight of surging demand and logistical challenges, triggering a cascade of price increases that continue to ripple through today's markets. Studies have shown that supply chain disruptions accounted for nearly 60% of the inflationary surge beginning in early 2021. Charts filled with upward trends and frantic satellite imagery of busy ports remind us of the tumult behind these numbers. In this initial act, we confront the question, how do unexpected shocks in supply lead to the soaring prices we witness around the globe? The answer is found in the intricate dance between supply, demand, and the often unpredictable forces of the natural and geopolitical world. Supply shocks occur when the very chain that delivers goods, be it essential food items or energy resources, suddenly falters. Natural disasters, pandemics, and trade disruptions converge to create severe bottlenecks, and when goods become scarce, their prices invariably skyrocket. In parallel, energy markets have long served as the engines driving these inflationary pressures. Consider the ripple effects set off by the volatility in oil and natural gas markets. The World Bank's April 2022 report warned that the Russia-Ukraine conflict unleashed the largest commodity price shock since the 1970s. Energy prices surged, projected to increase by over 50% in 2022 alone. When the cost of energy rises, it sends shockwaves through every connected sector: transportation, manufacturing, and even agriculture. The cascading effect is visibly dramatic in our satellite images and graphical representations of energy flows across continents. This fuel-driven fire ignites what we now refer to as the hunger gap. As energy prices climb, the cost of producing and transporting food follows suit. Agricultural communities struggle under the weight of higher fuel expenses, while shifting climate patterns and geopolitical strife further complicate food supply systems. In many developing nations, the increased cost of food is not merely an economic statistic, it is an existential threat. Parents are forced to make heartbreaking choices between staples like bread and other essentials, and entire communities find themselves teetering on the edge of food insecurity. As we transition into the second act of our documentary, the narrative deepens. We shift our analytical lens to the systemic drivers that reinforce these inflationary pressures. The economic landscape is shaped not only by isolated shocks, but by enduring, intertwined factors that are as much about human behavior and policy as they are about market forces. The first in this chain of factors is the global supply chain slowdown. From ports congested with container ships to manufacturing hubs struggling to meet demand, the world has experienced significant bottlenecks since the onset of the pandemic. Every delay and disruption adds a layer of cost that spirals upward as companies pass it on to consumers. This persistent strain on supply chains highlights the fragility of modern logistics, where even a small delay can have vast, transcontinental echo effects. Parallel to these supply disruptions is the housing squeeze, a phenomenon where housing costs have soared to unprecedented levels. In many urban centers, housing is no longer just a place to live. It is a coveted asset, an investment vehicle that inflates rent and property prices. Limited housing stock, combined with booming demand, has created a perfect storm that raises rents to levels far beyond what many can afford. As families are pushed into smaller, less secure living environments, the human toll becomes painfully clear. Neighborhoods that once thrived on community are now battling the ravages of economic exclusion and inequality. Within these housing struggles lies a turning point in our narrative, a moment where the economic conflict becomes palpably human. The labor paradox emerges here, encapsulated by what economists term the wage-price spiral. In theory, rising wages should offset the pinch of inflation. However, when wages fail to keep pace with exploding prices, the promise of prosperity slips further from reach. For many, the bitter irony is that despite working harder, the real value of their earnings diminishes. Reports from the International Labor Organization in November 2022 revealed that global monthly wages fell 0.9% in real terms during the first half of that year, marking the first decline in real wages this century. The weight of this statistic is a reminder that while economies grow in complexity, the benefits are not evenly distributed, and the working class often bears the heaviest burden. In the midst of these conditions, the role of monetary and fiscal policy enters the scene. Central banks and governments worldwide have danced a delicate balancing act, attempting to stimulate growth with policies that inadvertently add fuel to the inflation fire. The infusion of money into economies, intended to spur recovery, can escalate aggregate demand beyond sustainable levels. This demand pull factor is yet another critical element in the inflation equation. As more money chases the same limited pool of goods and services, pressure mounts and prices surge further. The interplay of these policies, and their sometimes unintended consequences, complicates the narrative and underscores the challenges faced by policymakers trying to navigate a perilous economic landscape. Throughout this exhaustive exploration, we see how interconnected forces lead to a system where the initial supply shocks intertwine with demand pressures and policy decisions, each reinforcing the other. Graphs illustrate these cycles vividly, a visual metaphor for how, like gears in a machine, one change in the system accelerates another. The result is a self-perpetuating cycle of rising costs that has deep and lasting implications for society at large. At the heart of this narrative lies the human impact, a theme that runs like a golden thread through every segment of our story. Rising prices are not a distant abstraction. They are a lived reality that intensifies poverty and inequality. Today, low-income households shoulder a disproportionate burden. For these families, every price increase in food, housing, and energy chips away at what little disposable income they have left. The World Bank has repeatedly warned that inflation hits the most vulnerable the hardest, a claim borne out in the stark reality of crowded food markets and overburdened housing environments. It's a sobering reminder that behind every economic indicator, is a person whose life is transformed by these shifts in the marketplace. The picture grows bleaker when we consider the ripple effects of inflation on social stability. Historically, steep increases in the cost of essentials have led to social unrest and political instability. The 2007-2008 world food price crisis, for instance, was a harbinger of protests and turmoil in several developing nations. Skyrocketing costs ignite a spark of discontent, a fire that can spread rapidly in communities already struggling under economic strain. In our modern context, similar tensions are quietly building. As prices continue to surge, discontent simmers beneath the surface, and the potential for widespread social unrest becomes ever more real. Satellite footage of bustling markets and live images from urban neighborhoods are poignant visual reminders of a society on the brink. Yet, even as our narrative paints a picture of crisis, there remains a glimmer of potential renewal, a call to action that beckons us to look towards solutions. In the final act of our documentary, we explore the path ahead and the steps necessary to mitigate and ultimately resolve this complex economic dilemma. The road to recovery is not a simple one, and there are no ready-made solutions to the crisis of global inflation. However, understanding the intricate web of factors at play is a critical first step. In order to craft effective and sustainable solutions, we must begin by acknowledging all dimensions of the problem. It is clear that inflation is driven not solely by one factor, but by an interplay of supply shocks, demand pressures, and policy decisions. Recognizing this fact empowers us to move beyond superficial remedies and fosters a holistic approach. By addressing the vulnerabilities in global supply chains, rethinking housing policies to ensure affordability and security, and recalibrating monetary approaches, there is hope for a balanced economic future. A comprehensive response to inflation must also consider the urgent need for inclusivity. The disparity in economic outcomes, the richest 1% capturing a staggering 41% of new wealth since 2000, while the poorest 50% gain a mere 1 cent, highlights the deep inequalities entrenched in our societies. It is an inequality emergency, a call echoed by global leaders and economists alike. Bridging this divide requires robust policy frameworks, international cooperation, and innovative financial strategies that prioritize the welfare of the most vulnerable. Our journey through this complex crisis is both an examination and an invitation. It invites us to look beyond mere numbers and to see the faces behind the statistics, the families wrestling with the rising cost of everyday necessities, the workers who watch their wages fail to keep up with relentless inflation, and the communities striving for stability in an uncertain world. We have witnessed how geopolitical risks, from conflicts in the Middle East to tensions in Eastern Europe, magnify economic challenges, pushing vital commodities like oil into uncharted waters. We have seen how the world's interconnected markets mean that a disturbance in one region can send shockwaves across the globe. And we have learned that any lasting solution must address these root causes with both insight and empathy. The evidence is undeniable. Data from institutions such as the World Bank and the International Labor Organization, coupled with real-world observations from food markets and housing districts, coalesce into a narrative that is as urgent as it is complex. The challenges are immense, but so too are the opportunities for creating a more resilient and equitable economic system. If we can harness the analytical insights of economic charts and the human stories captured on camera, there is hope for designing policies and solutions that not only stabilize the price of essentials, but also restore dignity and stability to communities worldwide. As our narrative draws to a close, it is important to reflect on the journey we have taken together. We began by observing the dramatic rise in prices that is shaking the foundations of economic life. From there, we peeled back the layers to reveal an intricate tapestry of causes, from disrupted supply chains and energy crises to housing shortages and inequitable wage dynamics. Each element, while daunting in its own right, is part of a broader puzzle that we must solve in order to stabilize our future. The story of global inflation is a tale of interconnected forces, each amplifying the other to create a systemic crisis that touches every corner of society. By embracing a holistic understanding of these complex economic dynamics, we can begin to build a foundation for meaningful change. We must champion policies that enhance global supply chain resilience, reform housing markets to deliver affordability, and design monetary systems that safeguard the most vulnerable from the pressures of inflation. In this final reflection, the call to action is as clear as it is urgent. Understanding the intricate web of factors driving global inflation is the first step toward crafting solutions that protect the most vulnerable among us. It is a challenge that calls on policymakers, economists, and citizens alike to come together, to share insights, and to build a future where economic growth benefits everyone, not just a select few. In the face of rising prices and economic uncertainty, there is both a responsibility and an opportunity. The opportunity lies in our capacity to learn from the past, to innovate for the future, and to forge strategies that overcome even the most daunting challenges. The responsibility lies in ensuring that every policy and every reform we implement is infused with empathy, aiming to restore not only market stability, but also the human dignity at the heart of every community. As the sun sets on this exploration, let us remember that the struggle against global inflation is not fought solely in the realms of economic theory and policy debate. It is fought every day in the marketplaces, on the streets, and in the homes of people who deserve not just survival, but a chance at a better life. Our journey has revealed the stark realities of a global crisis, one that demands both systemic solutions and a renewed commitment to justice and equity. Thank you for joining us on this vital exploration. Together, by acknowledging the complexity of our economic realities and taking deliberate steps toward reform, we hold the power to shape a future that is both prosperous and fair. Understanding the intricate web of factors driving global inflation is the first step toward crafting solutions that protect the most vulnerable among us. Join us as we unravel this complex crisis and explore paths to economic resilience.